Oh, excuse me. Excuse me, guys. Thought I hit the wrong button. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, and societal impacts or related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and today we're going to be talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs with our guest, Quinn. Quinn, thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to be here with us. Appreciate you, buddy.
I thank you. I appreciate you giving me the platform, and it was such an honor to meet you in person the other day for New Year's. It was really cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that is pretty cool. And we both actually thought that we have already done the show together.
yeah, I
When we
really
first
did.
did our introduction call, I think we were on the phone for an hour.
Yeah, yeah. It was such a great talk. I was like, yeah, I did a podcast with you. And we're like, oh, we
Yeah.
haven't actually done it. That was really cool.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought that. When you said it, I'm like, "Whew, all right, I feel much better now," because I do so many and I talk to so many people, I you lose track. One of these
Yeah,
days, I'll have an assistant to help me keep things
right.
on
Absolutely.
strike there, here. So anyway, what the heck did you mean by Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Because you asked me before the show if I've heard of that, and I don't believe I have.
Yeah, so this is actually something. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a concept that was introduced by, I believe it's Abraham was his first name, Abraham Maslow. He was a psychologist, I believe. Anyway, he came up with this idea that life, all of our life's fulfillment is based on this triangle. And this triangle really made it was like an epiphany to me when I discovered this, because this is how the triangle goes. So at the very top of your triangle, and let me reiterate, the idea behind this triangle is that without having your entire triangle fulfilled, of there's five different aspects of this triangle, just like the food pyramid, right? You need this and you need that and you need this and you need that to have a healthy body. Well, this triangle is that exact same concept, but this is the triangle that he's claiming you need in life to feel fulfilled.
Hmm.
So this made a lot of sense to me. This is how the triangle starts. So at the very top, you have self-actualization. The next step is self-esteem. The step below that is love and belonging. The step below that is safety. And the step below that is physiological needs. So if you think about it, the very bottom of your food pyramid is what you need the most of, right? It's like the main thing that you need to have a healthy body is this bottom piece of your triangle. This is the same thing with feeling fulfilled. So your physiological needs are things like food, water, and sleep, right? You need those. You can't continue life without those things, or else you die. The next step up, which is safety, that's that's like home, and a place to call your own, a place where you can go and feel safe. The step above that is love and belonging, achieving deeper, more meaningful relationships. Feeling like you belong somewhere, feeling like you have a community, feeling like you know you have people that you can turn to for help. The step above that is self-esteem. You've acquired the skills that lead to honor and recognition. So self-esteem, that's how I feel about myself. Like, do I feel good about myself? Do I feel bad about myself? And then the very top one is self-actualization. You are living proof of your highest potential. So am I actually feeling fulfilled? Am I actually doing things? Am I helping people? Am I, achieving my goals? Things like that. Self-actualization.
Okay.
So his theory is that when you're missing one of these aspects of feeling fulfilled, you will search for you will search to fill that gap with other things. And this made so much sense to me because I looked at these things and I was like, okay, physiological needs, food, water, sleep. Well, for me, when I was homeless, and I was starving and I was, having to do stupid things like steal from grocery stores and whatever just to eat, I was having to resort to negative behaviors. And so when I was homeless or when I was starving and all these things, I was looking to replace that with something else. And when we're taught from an early age to use substances as a coping mechanism, when I was missing that particular aspect, I would use drugs. Well, I'm homeless. I might as well just get high. At least that way I'm high and homeless. When I didn't have safety, a community, people that I could turn to, family, things like that, I would try and replace that with drugs. Well, I don't have anybody. Nobody's my friend. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares anyway. Might as well get high. Love and belonging. When I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. It's like, oh, well, I'm not welcome at my mom's house. I'm not welcome at rehab. I'm not welcome in these, all these things. I didn't have any love and belonging. I didn't have someone to give love to or receive love from. I was like, well, I might as well get high. Nobody cares anyway.
Yeah.
Self-esteem. When I didn't have self-esteem, I was low on myself. Oh, well, I'm worthless anyway. I'm never gonna amount to anything, never gonna do anything with my life. Everybody thinks I'm just a drug addict anyway. Might as well get high. Self-actualization. When I wasn't actually fulfilling my desires. I wasn't actually getting sober, or learning how to live sober, or learning how to, you know, feel fulfilled in my life through hobbies or, through my interests or whatever. I would get that. I would try and replace that with drugs. Oh, well, I've got nothing to do. I'm bored. The stimulation, my brain's craving stimulation. I can't get it through having hobbies because I don't have any because I've spent all my money on drugs. So when I don't have any self-actualization, I don't feel fulfilled, then I turn to drugs. And it was like this with every aspect of my life. If I didn't have one of these five things, I would try and replace that with something else. And because my coping mechanisms that I was taught was through substance abuse, I would often turn to substance abuse to fill that gap so that I could try to feel fulfilled. And that made a lot of sense to me. When I didn't have hobbies, when I didn't have self-esteem, when I didn't feel loved, when I didn't have a home, or I didn't have security, I turned to drugs. And so looking at that pyramid, I was like, okay, so let's start with my basic needs. Let's find a secure place to call home where I can come home to and it's not living under a bridge or at a freaking homeless shelter or at a detox or something. Let me build a home that I can call home, that I can retreat to when I need to and feel safe. I was just trying to replace my self-fulfillment with substances because I didn't know how to fill that triangle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was really important to me. Started to understand that, hey, when I feel like I'm missing out on something, my brain is gonna say, hey, no big deal. We'll just get that dopamine release of feeling like you belong from somewhere else. And that was an epiphany to me. I was like, okay, well, now all I got to do is work on these five things. Getting a home and getting hobbies and getting, a community together to support to support me and for me to support them. I have to get a sense of belonging, a sense of self-actualization. How am I going to actually feel fulfilled? And Maslow said you need all of these things to feel fulfilled. Because how do you feel fulfilled if you're doing really good at a hobby, but you're starving? Or you feel like you're doing all these amazing things, but you're not doing them for anybody. You're out here saying, "Oh, I'm going to do all these amazing things for the community," but there's nobody there. So it's like to feel fulfilled, you have to have these things.
So,
Um,
so, so question really quick, Quinn. What what got you to open your eyes to, well, let's not say that in that way. You said earlier when you was explaining each one of these that you didn't feel this way or you didn't feel that way or you felt like you wasn't needed. feeling those thoughts and then also coming across this and then telling yourself, "I need to have this." Did you question that? Because you have really questioned yourself saying, "I'm worthless anyway, right? So I might as well be worthless. I'm not loved, so I might as well continue not being loved. I'm not wanted," so on and so forth. Is it these steps that really got you thinking to turn it around? Or was it something else of you just saying, "You know what? I'm sick and frickin' tired of living the way that I'm living. If this is gonna help, I'm gonna give it a shot."
That's a great question. I think that it was a combination.
Okay.
I think that like Maslow's hierarchy of needs is simply just a tool that I use in my tool belt, just like the tools of AA, just like, the tools of the program of neuroplasticity that I went through and psychology and all these things. It's just one of the things in my tool belt that I use to remind myself, hey, man, if you're staying stagnant and you're not doing anything, you're not self-actualizing, you're not building your self-esteem, you're not building a community, you're not building a home, you're not building security, then you're going to lose. You're going to try and find other ways of feeling fulfilled. So Maslow's hierarchy is just one of the many tools that I
Okay.
use to feel, to towards my sobriety, to combat these triggers and relapse and all of these things. Um, but I take tools from all of the programs that I've used, and I think that that is really what's helped me to stay sober. Because me personally, I knew how to get sober, right? You just stop
Yeah.
doing drugs, whether it's through medical assisted treatment or freaking abstinence or whatever. I know how to get sober. Those steps are pretty easy, like put on paper. You just take away the substance and you'll get sober. So you can go get locked up or you can go to detox or rehab or whatever. My problem was that I didn't know how to stay sober. And so these tools are tools that help me stay sober. Things like, just knowing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs helps me to self-evaluate myself. Are you doing these things? Because if you have these things, then you won't be searching for that dopamine from somewhere else. Because that's really, I tell people, for me at least, I guess I should say, I tell people that I personally wasn't addicted to drugs. I wasn't addicted to drugs. Maybe I was physically addicted to heroin, you know, but I wasn't addicted to the substance. I was addicted to the obsession. And the obsession was of masking, escaping, numbing, and validating. Because I had no self-worth, no self-esteem, I thought that I could gain all the things that I was missing from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I thought I could get that by replacing them with drugs. Oh, well, I don't have friends. Well, I'll just sell drugs. And then everybody will come to me and everybody's going to be calling me for drugs. And now I feel wanted. I feel like these people are my friends because they're over here freaking, you know, kissing my butt to try and, get a deal out of me, or because they're a couple dollars short, or because, and that interaction was like, oh, I'm actually having a human interaction and they need me for something and I've got something they need. And so it's not my personality, it's drugs. And so that was like the false sense of needing me, you know? So every one of those things I could use drugs as a way to replace them. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like what had happened to me as a child. And so I used drugs as a way to mask who I was so that people didn't have to see that I was actually a broken individual who didn't have any self-esteem. I could just do drugs and everybody would think oh, he's happy, he's talkative and all this stuff on coke and everything else. So he must be a happy go lucky individual. Look at him out here at this party and he's just jabbering away, you know? I thought that I could numb all the traumatic events that happened to me through drugs. Oh, okay, well, I'll just nod off and I don't have to worry about it. I'll get so obliterated that I don't think about all that stuff, you know? So I had to I had to really be aware of what it was that I was trying to achieve and also be aware of why I couldn't stay sober. And that was really what piqued my interest, was why can't I stay sober? And the analogy that I've been bringing up quite a bit lately, because I really like this analogy, is that when you graduate from high school and you go to college to further your education to be a psychologist or a doctor or whatever it is, that's the profession that we're learning. And so if you go up and you ask the doctor who's got his PhD, hey, I need you to build a house for me. That doctor's going to be like, I'm not a carpenter. I'm a doctor. I don't know how to be a carpenter. And same with the carpenter. You ask him, hey, go be a doctor. He's going to be like, dude, I don't know how to be a doctor. I don't know how to perform surgery. I'm just a carpenter, you know? And it's the same thing with addiction. I don't know how to be a doctor and I don't know how to be a carpenter because I spent 18 years of my life being a career criminal, selling drugs, manipulating people. And that was my profession. That was what I studied. You know, I spent 18 years, I got a double PhD in freaking drug addiction, you
I was
know?
just gonna say that you got a PhD. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you tell somebody, hey, I need you to be sober, and they've been a drug addict their whole life, you're basically asking them, hey, I need you to be a doctor. You know, it's the same thing. Somebody told me today, well, I'm not asking these guys to freaking perform surgery. I'm asking them to be sober. And I said, what do you think is the difference to somebody who doesn't know how to do either of those things? There's no difference. You might as well be asking me to do surgery if you're asking me to be sober, and all I know is addiction. I don't know how to live a sober life. I don't know how to be a doctor. So we
Yeah.
have to teach these people how to be sober.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say that because they were sober before they became addicted, right? However, it was a miserable sobriety, right? Because they were suffering from things, right? So
Right.
now you're asking someone to be sober, but be happy at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
someplace they've not been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I love how you put that. That is a really good analogy of looking at that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so too because I think that a lot of people get that misconception. I've been told so many times by my friends, by my parents, by whoever, bro, just stop doing drugs.
Yeah.
Like how helpful has that ever been? Like, cool, dude, just hey, just go be a doctor. Like, it's not that simple. And yeah, it's like you think that, hey, just all you have to do is take this away. But what you're asking is for us to let go of any relief that we've ever experienced, right? Because despite all the physical pain, the mental anguish, losing relationships, losing friends and family, all the pain and agony that was brought on by addiction, there was still some sense of comfort in there. And that's why I continued to use drugs. It's because even though I'm addicted to a substance, I still somewhere in my brain feel some kind of control knowing that the pain that I'm inflicting on myself, I am the one doing that. And so I have control of that pain that
Yeah.
I'm inflicting. And
That's
that
that's
sense
why
of
you
control,
that's why you hear so many people say, "I'm not hurting anybody but myself."
right? Absolutely. And so yeah, so it's just for me, I had to get to a point where I didn't want to numb and escape and validate myself through substance abuse. I got to a point where I was like, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, sitting on my bed, and I had no money for my dog for his food. I had spent my last $10 on dope, and I was trying to shoot up for 45 minutes. My veins were so shot. They were all collapsed. I was trying to shoot up in the tiny little veins in my fingers and things. And I finally find a vein. It registers into the needle, and then I go to push back in and it starts stinging. So I know I'm missing the vein, and if I continue to press the needle, I'm going to lose the entire dope. I'm not going to feel any better. It's my last $10. I'm going to be in withdrawal for who knows how long. So I'm sitting here like looking for the vein and stuff. Finally find it. It registers. I push back in. It's missing. I pull back. I pull the needle back out, and I'm looking again for another vein. I finally find another vein. Boom. I try to freaking push the blood back in, and it's coagulated. So now the needle's clogged. And it was like the last needle that I had and everything. And I was just so frustrated because I was already in deep withdrawal. I was already in pain. I'm now sitting here poking myself, you know, countless times for the last 45 minutes, trying to get some kind of relief, but I'm also in so much pain from the withdrawal that every poke that I do is just like it's it's a pain that's unexplainable.
Mm.
And I was so frustrated. I freaking that the needle clog. I threw the needle across the room, and I started crying. Got down on my knees, and I just said, God, why me? Why are you doing this to me? Why did you pick me for this path? Why am I the one that's got to be stuck in addiction? I can't get myself off of this obsession of wanting to escape and numb and mask and validate. Why me? I can't do this anymore. Either take my life or give me strength. And I picked that needle up off the ground, and the needle was all bent off. So I just squirted it in my mouth, hoping that I'll get some kind of relief. And I laid down and I just cuddled my dog. And I wake up the next morning and I'm looking around my room, and my dog's sitting there looking at me. And, in my brain, I'm thinking, man, I'm such a piece of shit because I spent my last $10 on dope instead of getting dog food for my dog. $10 worth of dog food will last him a week. And instead I spent it on, you know, 6 to 8 hours of relief. I was like, holy cow, man. I'm looking around my room, and there's blood splatter all over the walls and stuff. And I was like, I gotta do something. I I I can't do this anymore. And just like I had asked, God gave me strength. And I called up my mom. I was like, "Hey, I gotta get my life together." And she's like, "Okay, well, go to your sister's house because she'll let you get sober there. I've gotten sober freaking countless times now. So she's always gonna support you in trying to get sober. Just go over there." So I go over there. I stay sober for 30 days, and I'm like, okay, well, in my brain I'm thinking, you know I've tried to get sober on my own so many times, I just can't stay sober. What do I need to do? And I was like, well, you need professional help, bro. Like, seriously, like, you need to get into a program, and you need to learn how to be sober. You need to learn how to be a doctor, because right now all you know is how to be a carpenter, and you need to learn how to be a doctor. I was like, okay, so I need to go and find a way of how am I going to be sober? How am I going to live sober? I went and got into a sober living program. I did AA almost every day. Just about every day I was doing an AA meeting. I started to learn the steps of AA. I started to learn, the principles and the steps and everything else. And the program of AA itself wasn't necessarily what attracted me. It was more so the steps, the tools that it gave you. And at first I was all hung up on, oh, well, I have to, give my will over to God and all this stuff. And, you know, um, but I told myself, man, you just got to figure it out. You got to be a doctor. And so I'm like, okay, whatever it is, I'm just going to soak it up like a sponge, and I'm going to work this program like however I've got to stay sober. So for the next 9 months, I'm going through this program, the sober living program. I'm doing almost a meeting every single day. And the entire time I'm doing it through abstinence. And I get to my 12th step that says, uh, as a result of working, or after having a spiritual awakening as a result of working these steps, we continue to carry the message to those who still suffer. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, where is this spiritual awakening? Because even though I've been abstinent and I'm working the steps and doing everything I'm supposed to do, sponsoring people, taking inventory and everything else, gave my life over to God, I got baptized, everything else, I still want to do drugs. I still am craving that escape, that numbing, that masking and validation and everything else. What is this spiritual awakening that Bill Wilson's talking about? So I started to look into Bill Wilson, started to look deeper into his studies, started to look into what this spiritual awakening actually meant, because spiritual awakening, man, it could be anything,
Yeah.
you know? So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So I start reading on Bill Wilson, and I discovered that in December of 1934, Bill Wilson did a psychedelic treatment in New York called the Townes-Lambert treatment. And he is documented as writing to the great philosopher Carl Jung, I have had a white light spiritual awakening from this treatment, a psychedelic treatment. So you ask yourself, well, that's kind of strange. In December of 1934, so basically 1935, he goes he goes and does this psychedelic treatment, and then AA is founded in 1936. So it's kind of hard not to think, well, maybe there's a correlation, some epiphany that he got, and he's literally telling the great philosopher Carl Jung that he had his spiritual awakening from this treatment, a psychedelic treatment. And you say, well, how is that possible when the steps of AA clearly states no mood or mind altering substances? But yet he attributes this entire program of abstinence on a psychedelic treatment that he did. And I
Hmm.
started thinking, well, how is that even possible? Because it says no mood or mind altering substances. And then you look at the time frame, 1936, that was a year before drugs were made illegal. All drugs were legal in 1936. Marijuana, morphine, cocaine, everything was legal. So when you look at the program of AA, the program of AA is just that, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a program based on alcoholism. So I said, okay, so even though the program is based on alcoholism and he got his white light spiritual awakening through plant medicines, who at that time were not illegal, started to think, okay, so maybe this program isn't as like concrete as it appears to be. And I don't mean concrete as in it doesn't work. It absolutely does work. What I mean is that maybe that these guidelines and all of these things that we have placed on AA were not necessarily intended to be there. Then I go on to read further about Bill Wilson, and I discover in the 70s, when LSD research was prominent, that Bill Wilson again wrote to Carl Jung, the great philosopher, and said, hey, these guys in the program of AA that has now been around for 34 years plus, I realized that these people are having a trouble realizing this spiritual awakening, and they don't actually know what I mean by a spiritual awakening. So he started to look further into LSD research. This guy whose whole program is based on abstinence is now doing LSD research. That's a mood or mind altering substance.
Yeah.
So at that same time, I started hearing Joe Rogan talking about microdosing. I heard about ibogaine. I heard about ayahuasca and bufo and 5-MeO-DMT and all these plant medicines. And a part of me being a drug addict and being freaking just, I don't know, neurodivergent, I guess, is super intrigued by conspiracy theories. And so I'm like, well, why did plant medicines even become illegal? And then I start to read about, oh, well, the pharmaceutical companies started to patent these petroleum-based pills so that they could market them, and then that same company started to give massive funding to educational systems under the condition that they teach their medical program. So of course, if I came up with a dealership for cars and all I sold was Fords, and I want to sell Fords, I'm going to go out and tell you, hey, I'll give you the money that you need to start your mechanic school, but I need you to teach only the program of Fords. I don't want you to teach Chevy. I don't want you to teach Dodge, only Fords. So what are you going to do? You're going to say, okay, well, yeah, you're funding the place. You're
Yeah.
giving
Right.
me the money to make the library and to do all these things. Yeah, I'm going to teach your program. And that's exactly what the pharmaceutical companies did. We'll give you the funding, but you got to teach our program. And so plant medicine started to phase out, and now Western medicine started to take over. So For me, I started seeing all the stuff about microdosing and plant medicines and ayahuasca and ibogaine, and I heard about this spiritual awakening that Bill Wilson got from his psychedelic experience, and I heard all these people getting amazing results from ibogaine, 99% success rate on ibogaine. Ibogaine is a plant medicine that you go out into. It's not legal here in America, so you go to Mexico and you do a plant medicine retreat for 7 days, and it's basically like a brain reset. It basically like fries all of your neurological passages. It kills your ego, all the freaking, your ego is basically what every single person has told you you are since the beginning of your existence. So if I tell you every single day how amazing you are, how great you are, how good you're gonna do in your next job, how all these things, your ego is like, yeah, heck yeah, I'm prepared for this. Like I've got validation from other people that I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna succeed. And then your self-actualization says, yeah, I am gonna succeed. And then you go on and you do great. And the same thing happens when you tell somebody, well, you're just going to be a drug addict your whole life. You're going to be a career criminal, give you 2 weeks before you end up back in prison. You're just going to relapse again. That freaking self-fulfilling prophecy. So I was like, let me look into these plant medicines. I want this ego death. I want this white light spiritual awakening that is promised to us in the 12th step because I've done my work. I put in my time, I've done my work. I need this. Where do I get this? So I started to look into psilocybin because psilocybin is where I was living at the time. Psilocybin was decriminalized. So I couldn't get in trouble for it. So I was like, okay, cool. So I took 7 grams of mushrooms and right as I take my 7 grams of mushrooms, I remember hearing people talking about setting your intentions and writing in your journal about the things that you want to address while you're in this disassociative state. And for me, I was like, well, I've done mushrooms hundreds of times. I never really got any healing benefits from it, but something was different this time. And the difference was the intention and the setting. And this time I had gone into this place of disassociation with the intent to heal. And I wrote down all these things. Why do you feel worthless? Why do you feel inadequate? Why do you keep relapsing? Why are you trying to numb, escape, mask, and validate from the life that you're living? And as the mushrooms are onsetting, the disassociation starts to happen, where I'm no longer thinking from my brain. I am just the observer looking at somebody else. And that's what they mean by disassociation is you become disassociated from yourself so that you can see yourself from a third person.
Yeah, so
And
you're
so I'm
basically watching yourself like on a movie screen, basically, right?
absolutely, and I love that you said that because that's actually exactly what happened to me. So I'm in this space of disassociation. I'm looking at my current self and my younger self from a third person. And so basically looking at the back of my head of my younger version and my current version, and they're sitting on a lake bed, and it's like sunset, and it's a beautiful scene, and then this giant screen pops up, and on the screen is playing all of my traumatic events that happened, the molestation, the abandonment, um, the bullying, um, losing friends, everything that I did, the manipulation, the lying, the stealing, the cheating, every every pivotal moment in my life was playing on this screen, and I was seeing it as a third person watching myself, the two versions of myself watching it. And I'm as a third person, I'm watching the two people laugh and cry, and some things are so ridiculously like so dumb, the things that I allowed myself to do, looking back, you can laugh at those things. So I'm sitting here, I'm laughing, I'm crying. We're going through all the emotions, watching this TV screen replay of my entire life.
Hmm.
The end of the movie ends, or the movie ends, And I see them two turn to each other, and the older version and the younger version of myself, and they say, "So what do we do now?" Because it's all out on the table. The reason why you mask, the reason why you feel the need to feel validated, or the reason why you want to numb this life, the reason why you want to escape, all these things, it's out on the table now. We can see it. It's right here. This is why you do those things. The molestation, the bullying, the sense of no community or belonging, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I was constantly moving, didn't have any, real security within my family, within my friends, had no self-esteem, no hobbies, no self-actualization. I didn't have a stable home or a stable environment. And so I was like, here it is. Here's all the things. So now that it's out on the table, what do we do now? Because for the past 18 years, what we've been doing is we've let every single one of these things that are here on the table before us, we've let that control our lives. What happened to me as a child being molested, that has kept me from being who I truly want to be. And who I truly want to be is somebody who has a lot of self-worth and that understands that what happened to me doesn't define who I am as a person, and it doesn't define my self-worth. So I look back, so I'm watching them, and they come into agreement. They said, okay, the two choices are we continue to let this rule our lives, or we move forward. Despite all of the things that have happened, we move forward. What do we do? And I said, well, I don't want to die anymore. Because for a long time, I wanted to die. I wanted to be stuck in that addiction. I wanted to numb, escape, mask, validate, everything else. I wanted to be in that space. Now, face to face with everything that I've been through and face to face with my younger self, I say, what do we do now? I said, I want to live. I don't want to die. I just want to be happy. And that's why I've wanted to die this whole time, is because I wasn't happy. I didn't love who I was. I didn't love the situation I was in. I didn't love anything about myself. So of course I wanted to escape myself. And I couldn't. I couldn't escape myself. I was stuck with me. So I had to learn, how do I fall in love with myself again, where I don't feel the need to mask who I am or escape who I am. I don't feel the need to feel validated because I have self-worth, and your validation does not define my self-worth. And so I say, okay, so these are the things that we need to work on, and let's go forward. So after that day, well, before that, so at the very end of that, I'm hugging my younger self, and we're just sitting there, and I'm like, I love you. Like everything that you've been through. I was heavily bullied as a child because I was from France. I had a strong accent. My last name, Quentin Lapeyre. Like everybody knew from the moment I introduced myself that I was a foreigner. And growing up back in the 90s, being a foreigner was not easy.
Mm.
Didn't matter if you were French or Irish or freaking Mexican, or didn't matter. If you were different, it was difficult, especially for young kids. Young kids are just like that. If you're different, I'm gonna make fun of you. So I was like, everything that you've been through, like you need to observe that. Like just look, you're here and you have survived 100% of what you've been through. I'm proud of you and I love you. And now that all of this is out on the table, and we can, all of that weight is lifted off of our shoulders of the disgust in myself and my low self-worth and everything else. Now that everything's out on the table, I can tell you, I'm proud of every single one of these things that you've overcome. I love you. And not only that, but I like you. I like who you are. I like the person that you're trying to be, the effort that you're making to be something greater than what you've been for the last 18 years.
And that's
I
probably
like
the
you.
first time you've even told yourself that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the first
100%.
time.
And I started to cry. I started to cry because you're absolutely right. It was the first time that I even told myself that I love me, let
Yeah,
alone that I like me, you know. And I was just bawling my eyes out, and it was a happy cry. It was a happy cry because for the first time in my life, I did love who I was. And so from that moment on, where I said, I love who I am and I like you, that was more validation that I needed than from anybody. Just loving myself. And so from that moment, I didn't feel the need to escape my life anymore. I wanted to enjoy life through these new through this new vision, through these new eyes of loving myself. I wanted to get more into hobbies and learn more about, things that interested me like yoga and sound healing and all these things. I said, "Okay, so now that I love myself and I don't feel the need to escape who I am because I love who I am, I don't feel the need to mask who I am because, well, let's face it, after 18 years of addiction, I can't tell somebody a story of my life without addiction being in a huge part of what that story is. So I said, you know what? I'm going to stop allowing myself to feel shameful for the things I've done because what I've done, my addiction, does not define me for life.
absolutely.
I am not an addict for life. I may have a predisposition to falling into addiction more easily than some others, but I am not an addict. That is not my title. That is not my role. I'm a human being. I'm a person. I have feelings. I'm not an addiction. I had no need to mask who I was because I just have come to accept it. I'm just, dude, 18 years of addiction. That was part of my story. I'm not running away from it. So why would I lie to you and tell you that I was a doctor for 18 years when I was an addict for 18 years? So I'm just going to own it. And the reason why I can own it is because I love who I am today. And so I can say, doesn't matter what I did, who I was then is not who I am now. And I don't want you to hear me say it. I want you to watch me do it and live this life and prove to you that I am not just an addict, you know? And it was like when I got to the whole self-worth thing and I'm like, "Hey, yeah, but somebody still took advantage of you from the ages of 5 to 7. Some guy was molesting you and touching you and doing all these things and your self-worth and that person treated you like this because you aren't worth somebody protecting." And I was like, "Hey, you know what? What that person did to me is not a reflection of my self-worth. It's a reflection of his self-worth."
Yes, yes,
And so I said, the first thing that I've got to do symbolically and like in my head, I was like, you've got to forgive him. You got to forgive your abuser. So I didn't do that face to face because I actually don't even know like I know his name and everything else, but I couldn't even put a face to the name. So I did that symbolically in my head. And I imagined this person standing in front of me and I said, "Hey, all the things that you've done to me, the molestation and then treating my body like it was yours." It was really weird because the final straw was completely, well, I don't want to say completely, but it was super dumb. So the final straw of him molesting me, I walked over into his backyard and he was there with the girl. He was only like a few years older than me. I was, from 5 to 7 and he was whatever, 8 to 12 or something. He's in the backyard with this girl and him and his girlfriend, I guess. They were the ones that were making all the kids of the neighborhood touch each other, touch them, do all these sexual acts. And he's like, "Hey, show her your belly button." And that day, I don't know what came over me. I was just like, "No, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of you. No, I'm not showing you my belly button." And I ran around to the front of the house and I knocked on the door And his mom answers, and I was like, your son asked me again to show him my belly button, and I'm so sick of it. And she's like, what are you talking about? I don't care. Freaking go. I went and told my mom, Mom, you know, Mike, he's just he's doing it again, and he's asking me to show him my belly button, and I'm tired of it. I don't want to show him my body anymore. And she's like, okay, don't. And in my brain, I wasn't telling them, hey, this guy's making me show him my belly button. In my head, I was like, it was all of it. It was all the sexual acts. And it was the fact that he was using my body however he wanted, and he was commanding my body. Show me your belly button. It's the same thing as, suck my what,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what it felt like to me. But being 7 years old and trying to communicate that to my family, who already have a language barrier because my first language isn't English, and I'm 5 to 7, and I started learning French. I was halfway between English and halfway between French, trying to communicate to somebody who only speaks French or only speaks English. So in
Mm.
my brain I was like, oh, nobody cares. And I kept that silent for the next 30 years. So I told my abuser in my head, I'm like, I forgive you. I forgive you for everything that you've done. Not as a way of letting you off the hook, because what you did is not right, but your actions have made me feel worthless about myself to the point where I have ruined my life. And in my head, it's all your fault. So I forgive you. And I forgive you so that I can let go of that resentment. I'm not forgiving you for you. I'm forgiving you for me so that I can let go of that resentment, so that I can no longer hold that against you. When you're a kid or your mom or your spouse or whatever, they do something wrong and they say, I'm sorry, I apologize, whatever. And you say, I understand. Thank you for apologizing. I accept your apology. You can't hold that against them anymore.
Yeah. Right.
That's messed up. Freaking 2 months down the line, you're still talking about the thing you already forgave me for. You can't do that. Right. And so forgiving my abuser was a way of me letting go of that resentment and basically taking my power back. I forgave you, so I can no longer blame you for all of the things that I'm holding myself back from. So I take my power back. I'm taking that back. And now I cannot hold a grudge against you. I can't hold a resentment towards you for everything that happens to me from this day forward. And the next morning, time for my brain to come back down to earth and process everything. I woke up and that white knuckling had stopped.
Wow.
I sitting here looking around like I don't want to get high. The next month, my sister, she comes up to me. She's like, let's go on a road trip. Let's go to Georgia. Or I'm sorry, let's go to Seattle, Washington. So okay, let's go. So we got in the car, and for the next 30 days, we're on the road with a freaking big old Doberman and 3 cats. And we're going through the different states. We stopped off here in Utah. We were living in Kansas at the time. We stopped off here in Utah. I had a bunch of friends here still that were sober, so we hung out with them. And then one of my friends who's not sober, he drinks, but he's not like heavy into addiction. He's like, "Hey, let's go play pool at the bar." Okay, let's go play pool. We go out there, we play pool. All of a sudden, freaking after an hour of us chilling there playing pool, the freaking bar starts to fill. And there's like 50 people in this bar. And now it's like a giant party at this bar. And we're like, what the heck's going on? Like, we just came here to play pool. There's all these people, and all these people are talking to us. And I have all this energy in me from being sober and finally being out and talking to people again. I'm making friends with all these random strangers. And I'm like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom. I walk in, and the guy's sitting there. He's like, you want to bump a Coke? And my heart skipped a beat.
Well, I
It
could.
was almost it was almost like seeing your ex that you had such a volatile relationship with, and it was such a toxic relationship, and you finally tell her, hey, I don't ever want to see you again. And then you walk into a restaurant and there she is in the back sitting by herself. Your heart jumps. But in my brain, I was like, hey, I know, I know I want you. I know I love you. And I loved the times that you've given me away, the ability to escape and numb and all these other things along with heroin. But just like a toxic relationship, I may love you and what you can do, but we're just not good for each other. We're just not good for each other. We don't belong together. I can't be with you. You've hurt me. You've taken so much from me physically, mentally. You've taken everything from me. The physical pain, the mental anguish, the anxiety and the stress and everything else. It's just I can't do it with you anymore. I can't be with you. I I I don't want this. It was the first time that I had ever turned down coke in my life.
Did that shock you, Quinn?
It was absolutely in my, half for a half a second there, I'm like, we're not going to turn down free coke, are we? you know?
Right. Yeah, right.
Um, but then the tape played in my head. Well, what happens if I do coke right now? Because for the last hour and a half, I've been in this bar having fun, making friends, talking to people. My sister's here, and she's so proud of me that I'm not freaking, I'm not doing drugs, and that we're here on vacation, something that I hadn't been able to do in 18 years because I couldn't be far away from my dope dealer. Like we're on a road trip, thousands of miles away from home,
Mm.
and that was just not possible for me because once I leave the state, I don't have the drug dealer anymore. Where do I get enough heroin or coke to last me until I get back? And this was a 30-day trip, so I didn't have enough money to last me 30 days, that's for sure. So I was sitting here like, man, this is the greatest time of my life. Why would I introduce a substance that is going to take away from this experience? Because it's not going to add to this experience. I'm not going to be more happy. I'm not
Right.
going to be more outgoing. I'm not going to, things aren't going to get better if I do coke. It's only going to get worse. So why would I add that to my experience? And I looked over at my sister, and she was across the room talking to, I came out of the bathroom, and then all of us were like, hey, well, I wasn't, but somebody was like, hey, let's go to my house. Like the dude literally lived across the street. Let's take the party over to my house. We go over to this house, and I shit you not, probably 80% of the people there were doing coke. And my sister and I were like looking at each other, and like we're all having a good time. Everybody's having fun. The music is playing. Everybody's talking, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, you know what? Whatever. Like, sure, a part of me wants to do it, but a bigger part of me does not want to deal with having to explain to my sister that I relapsed, on top of knowing that I'm not going to have more excitement or more fulfillment by doing this drug. It's going to be immediately apparent that I go from having the time of my life to sitting in a corner, freaking grinding my jaw, watching everybody have fun.
Yeah.
So why would I do that? And somebody else offers me a bump of coke there at that party. And I'm like, nah, I appreciate it, man, but I'm in recovery. I don't think that that would add to my experience right now. And he just sat there like dumbfounded for a second. And he was like, bro, how do you do it? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, man, how do you do that? How do you say no? And I was like, man, I just looked at the situation that I'm in right now, and I said, will this add or take away from my experience? And I can tell you right now that doing that will not add to this experience. And the whole freaking vibe that I'm on right now is I want to experience life to its fullest. And the only way that I can do that is by being present. And by taking that drug, I will not be present. And because this is the first time that I've been out partying sober, I want to experience what this is like. I want to see, is this even better than being on drugs all the time? I was
Yeah,
curious
it's a
too.
new life for you, right? I mean,
Right.
seriously, it is. It's going from black and white.
Yeah, absolutely. So I told him that, and he started crying. he started bawling to me, bro. Man, I can't do it. I don't. He was. I come to find out he was the guy that was supplying the whole party with coke.
Hmm.
So he was like a big dealer and stuff. And now in my mind, I'm thinking, dude, I used to be you. I used to be exactly where you're at, and I wanted to get sober, but I didn't know how. And we sat there and talked for a good 30 minutes, and I told him about my whole life experience, and he's telling me how he's stuck and doing all this stuff and everything else. And I just started to, I didn't tell him from a place of judgment of what you should do and what you got to do and all this stuff. I was like, man, this is what's worked for me. This is all I can tell you is what's worked for me, because people always told me you got to do this, you got to do that, blah, 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 and that never worked for me. I just had to do what I knew was going to work for me. And
Yeah.
so this is what I've been doing. And he was like, "Thank you so much, bro. Thank you." And I turned to my sister and I go, "Olive, I just turned down Coke." And she screams from across the room, "I'm so proud of you."
So that's cool.
And man, that feeling, I'm getting it right now, that feeling, that rush of like, hey, I'm accomplishing something sober by myself.
Yeah.
There's not a substance behind me. You know, we tell people like, you can't have somebody come in, you can't have somebody on steroids come in and tell you how great of an athlete they are. You know, just like I can't tell you how great of a person I am if I'm always on drugs. So me, I was like, I was just, I got this huge dopamine flood from actually achieving something by myself. By myself. I didn't have to have somebody to sit there next to me and hold my hand and tell me, no, he doesn't want Coke or anything. I didn't have to be there in that moment on some kind of substance to try and feel masking, like I'm masking or validated or anything like that. I was there on me. And the only substance that I had was me. And I'm accomplishing it. And
Yeah.
being able to finally accomplish something without being on a substance, man, that feeling was incredible. And I was so proud of myself. And I was like, that right there is the best high I've ever had. That that feeling of self-confidence to be able to say, I don't want to escape this life. I don't want you to think that I'm somebody other than who I am presenting to you right now, who I am. I don't have to pretend to be this or that or whatever. I'm just me. And if you don't like me, you don't have to. That's fine. That's your decision. You
I
know?
love that you said that, Quinn, because we talked about that on my earlier show about the same thing about being who we are as individuals, right? When we're searching for ourselves, which both the guest and I both said this is it's a lifelong search, right? We're
Mhm.
continuously working on bettering ourselves. You just don't get to a certain point and you're done, right? Because
Right.
there's always something different that you can do better, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what we talked about. And matter of fact, one of our shows last week we talked about that too, about accepting who we are as individuals and loving who we are,
Mhm.
right? Because
Absolutely.
everyone that I've talked to, including yourself, we have love for ourselves, number one, but that love resonates to everyone else,
Mhm.
right? So we're spreading love, we're spreading kindness, we're spreading hope, and I love that you said to that gentleman that you sat down with that this is what worked for me, because we all have our own ways of going through things, right? It's like when my ex-wife was going through her battle, a lot of people are going, well, did you go to Al-Anon? Yeah, I went to Al-Anon. I went to 3 meetings. And after that third meeting, I knew right then and there that was not a fit for me. This was not a place for me to heal.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I didn't find anything till later down the road. So we all have our own journey, right? And you even said at the beginning of the show, you've taken bits and pieces of everything.
Right.
And that's what's worked for you.
Yep.
Because it's not a one shop fix.
Right.
I've had guests on the show that, I mean, they praise up and down the 12-step program, and deservingly so. It saved their freaking life.
Mhm.
Amen to that, right? It worked for them. I've had other people come on the show and go, "Oh, heck no. Oh,
Yeah.
heck, I didn't want anything to do with it. It wasn't the direction I wanted to go. And then they start sharing what worked for them, just
Hmm.
like what you did.
Right.
And I heard my ex say once that even those in recovery are always judging other people in recovery.
Yep.
And she goes, I don't know if it's all of us, because she says, I find myself judging other people because they didn't do what I did. They're doing
Right.
it completely wrong. When they know really deep in their heart, it's what works best for them, right? Because
Hmm.
um, you may come across to a canyon that once had a bridge. You may have a way to still get across to that other side, but someone else may also have another way of getting across to that other side. Doesn't matter as long as you both get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the way I kind of looked at it, honestly, was, man, I was in active addiction for 18 years, and I wanted as many tools as I could to get me to finally have that spiritual awakening. And like I told you, I was 9 months abstinent in the program, working the steps, sponsoring people, inventory, gave my life over to God, working, daily journaling and everything else. And I'm still white knuckling it, looking for this program, or looking for this spiritual awakening. And then I come to find out that the spiritual awakening he's talking about is an experience that he had through psychedelics. And then I start to say, okay, so this whole freaking program of Alcoholics Anonymous is really about the principles of the steps. And nowhere in the principles or nowhere in the steps does it say anything about not doing drugs.
Hmm.
Sobriety, if you look up at the definition of sobriety, the literal definition is not being drunk. So another thing that really helped me was that being drunk, according to the Bible, is is not acceptable. You can't be a drunkard. It's not acceptable. But yet Jesus turned water into
The
wine.
wine. Yeah.
So in that space of thinking, I was like, okay, so it's not about like, can you have a glass of wine, or can you go and take a painkiller at the freaking hospital because you broke both your legs in an accident, or taking Adderall because you have ADHD, or taking Wellbutrin or lithium because you have bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. It's about the mind state. Are you of sober mind? And we hear this term, and this backed it up for me. You can be sober, or you can be clean, but not sober, which means you have no toxins in your system, but your mind, the way of thinking is not sober. If you've removed all the substances, oh, I don't do coke and heroin anymore, but every single day I go in, or not even every single day, but maybe once a month I go into the gas station and I steal a candy bar. That's dishonesty, and that is not sober. Sobriety is about honesty and transparency. It's about the state of mind. You
Yeah.
can't tell somebody who has borderline personality disorder, hey, you're not sober if you take your Wellbutrin, because Wellbutrin is a mood or mind altering substance. So you can't take your mental health medications. That makes no sense, because take away those mental health medications and that person will go manic. And the
Yeah.
next thing that they do is they're going to try and self-medicate to get some kind of relief from their manic state. And so they're going to take something. And if it's not Wellbutrin, it's going to be whatever else they know is going to work. And usually it's going to be their drug of choice.
You know, I you really opened my eyes to something here, Quinn. And um,
I love it. I love
yeah,
that.
we've gone about an hour, and I've got another call in 15 minutes. So
Sure.
um, it's that cleansing of the mind.
Yeah,
That's that's where you're waking me up. It's that cleansing of the mind, right? Because it's the mind that puts us in that addiction in the first place,
right. The ego.
right? So what you're saying is when you went through what you went through and you had your psychedelic awakening, or you watched the movie of your life,
Hmm.
you're unplugging all these freaking toxic neurons, right? All these
Yeah.
frayed neurons that have had you believe in all this other bullshit. all your life. You
Right.
got rid of them and you started plugging into something different.
Yep.
Once you cleanse that, your want or your need to go find something to help you feel differently was completely gone.
Yeah.
And it's not that you, and I don't want to make this sound wrong, because again, 12 steps has helped and saved thousands and thousands of people. It's that it basically cleansed you to where you got your mind in the right state to where you're going, I don't need that anymore because I'm good. I'm happy where I'm at. Before I wasn't. My head was a freaking mess, right? It
Yeah.
was just a bunch of scrambled eggs in there and I was trying to put everything back together and I couldn't.
Right.
I love how you looked at that and how yeah, because that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because I had a really bad relationship with my father. We didn't see each other or speak to each other for 5.5 years. Last time I saw him is when he was dying in Yuma. I went to Yuma and watched him on his deathbed, basically, right? And I really, really thought that I had forgiven him for a lot of stuff. And I was dead set that I had. And then I went through a coaching program here about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. I realized I only released about that much of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I worked on what they asked me to work on, and then also sitting down and do a write and burn, right? Putting all my thoughts on that piece of paper, man, no matter what it was. And for me, I just wanted to light that son of a bitch on fire. I just
Yep.
wanted to burn it and completely get rid of it. And to me, it was I was taking what was in here, I was putting it right here, and then I was getting rid of it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really helped me because I used to throw, my mom would say something and I'm like, oh yeah, well, if dad was here, this is what would happen, right? I was always throwing shit out there.
Mm-hmm.
Those thoughts will come up, just like your thoughts came up in the bathroom the first time that guy offered you coke.
Right.
And then I stopped and went, I don't need that anymore. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to keep my mouth shut for the very first time by changing up here.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
That's
awesome.
beautiful, man. That's beautiful. I'm glad you got to that space.
Well, and I'm glad that you said it the way that you said it, right? This whole story, this whole journey that you just shared with all of us. I mean, you went from really to me, went from the beginning to where your mind is at right now. And really it is all in here. It really frickin' is. And our
Mm-hmm.
past is our past, right? I mean, it really is. And some of us like to relive it over and over and over and over and over again. And man, it's not doing us any good. It's just creating more havoc and turmoil in our lives.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's not even so much that we like to relive it, but basically when you start to train your brain to think a certain way, your brain starts to build neurological passages that say, "Hey, this is how it's going to be." Just like me who, my first thought was, "Well, we've never turned down Coke before."
Right.
That's the neurological passages that say, "Hey, this is the way that we used to live." And so to break down those neurological passages and start to build new ones, my new one is, well, that's not the life path that I'm following anymore. I want to follow this new life path of the person that can say no because I have no need for it, you
Yeah.
know? So one last thing before we finish, because I know you gotta be on another call. The point that I was saying about telling somebody, hey, you're clean, you're not sober, you're this, you're that, or whatever, because of whatever, it states very clearly in the book of AA that we're but humble servants, we do not serve, and anybody taking medications is an outside issue, right? So to tell somebody, hey, you're not sober because you're taking Wellbutrin or you're taking lithium or freaking whatever it is because you have a mental health condition, we don't have that right. I'm not a therapist. Nobody in the room's a therapist. Nobody's a doctor. They can't tell you, oh, I've evaluated you, and with my professional opinion, you shouldn't be taking these drugs. No, this doctor went to school to understand my mental health condition, and this is what he says. So for me, when I got to that point of removing all of the substances and I was in abstinence and I'm looking for this spiritual awakening and I've got all this judgment and all this conditioning from AA, you're not sober if you're taking any mood or mind altering substances, I had to throw that out the window and say, look, ideally, I would never be on anything, but there are people who need medications, people with severe mental health conditions, ADHD, BPD, BD, like schizophrenia. You're going to tell somebody who's got schizophrenia, don't take your medications? Look what we did to Kanye. Kanye got, he told everybody I'm off my meds, and all of social media called him crazy. So that's what we're telling people. Either you're clean or you don't take your meds and you're crazy. So that's your two options. Either be clean or be crazy. And so me, I was like, I'm throwing that whole idea out the window of abstinence is the only way to recovery because I need medications and my medications are pills. And so I have ADHD, I have depression, I have borderline personality disorder. They want me to take 5 pills for that every single day. So I can either take those 5 pills or I can not take those 5 pills or I can find an alternative. And when you've lived in a manic state and fight or flight your whole life, you're like, hey, let me, instead of getting back on these substances that are chains, Adderall is a chain, there's a physical dependency. Xanax, there's a chain. You could literally die from it if you don't have it after being addicted. I was like, what is the alternative? I asked my therapist, what is the alternative to taking 5 different pills a day? And because at this point, I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, they were like, well, we have a medical marijuana program, and that'll take care of your anxiety and your depression and take care of, it'll regulate your brain. And so I was like, okay, let me try that. And that's what I've been working. So no, I do not claim to be clean. But because my mental health is not in a manic state, because I'm able to take CBD or CBG or low doses of THC, I don't get into those manic states that tell me, hey, you're broken. Hey, you're worthless. Hey, you're not doing it right. Stroking my ego and telling me, all these things. So I've started a program that I call Cali Sober, California Sober. It's actually a term that was coined by um, Demi Lovato. It just means that you use plant medicines in your recovery as an alternative to taking 5 different pills a day. And so I asked people, would you rather me go unmedicated for my mental health so that everybody can call me crazy and watch me relapse and ruin my life? Or would you rather me chained to 5 different pills every single day? Or would you rather that I find a plant alternative that's cannabis that wasn't even illegal before the freaking pharmaceutical industry took it over and paid people to teach their program? In 1934, cannabis was the biggest. It was the thing that they were using to like heal or treat almost everything, but it wasn't profitable because you can grow it outside on your own. So they had to find a way to patent it.
Yeah,
So so
absolutely.
to so to me, I was like, look, those are my 3 choices: go unmedicated, be on pills, or find a safe alternative. And for me, I found the safe alternative. And so my form of recovery is through plant medicines. And I don't think that that is the only way. I don't think that that is the one true way to getting sobriety or recovery. I think it is a path. It is a path that I took that's helped me. I've seen people succeed through abstinence. I've seen people succeed through medical assisted treatment like Suboxone and Methadone. I've seen people succeed through plant medicines. I've seen people succeed through mental health medications. I don't claim to have the answers, but I know that I have the answer for me, and this is what's working for me. So,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on, man. This has been a great conversation. I'm gonna venture and say that this is probably the best conversation on a podcast I've had, and I've done I've done a lot of these.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed having you, that's for sure. I mean, you shared some really great information. I've got almost a whole page of notes here that I was writing down while you were going. So
Heck yeah, thank you.
yeah. And I wish we did have more time. I mean, I really do. I wish we had more time
Yeah,
because
I'll
I know we
always
could
take way
talk
too
about
much
this
time
at
on
least for
these.
another half hour or so.
At least.
Um, one last thing here before we sign off.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like our audience to gain from the show, or what would be your main message? I know with what you shared was almost kind of like that same thing on how you look at it, but do you have anything else?
Yeah, so just one last thing. Like I said, my path isn't the one path. It's not the only path. It's not the right path, or might not be the right path for you. But if you're at that same, if you relate to what I said, and you're in that same crossroads of either I go medicated, I go unmedicated, I find a safe alternative, we do have a program of recovery called Men's Tribal House here in Salt Lake City. It's actually in Midvale, where we do accept a medical cannabis card. So to us, it didn't make much sense to let people come in on Suboxone and methadone, but then turn people away who have a medical card. So we are a cannabis-friendly sober living. If you're looking for, a program of recovery and you're looking to get out of, being on the streets, or if you're in prison or whatever, and you need some kind of recovery and you're afraid to do it through abstinence because you have mental health conditions that often lead you to relapse, please reach out. You can find me on Facebook under Quinn Lapeyre or Quinn Stone, or you can reach out to our Men's Tribal House that's also got a Facebook. It's just Men's Tribal House, cannabis friendly sober living, but should be able to find it just by saying Men's Tribal House.
Okay. Quinn, thank you so much, man. I mean, seriously, it's been an absolute pleasure and yeah, I said this on a few other shows with people, and when I say it, it's absolute true. I feel like I've known you for a long time, right? I think that connection's been there, and I had a great talk with you on New Year's Eve, great conversation, and so yeah, man, I appreciate you.
I
So,
appreciate you.
absolutely. Guys, again, thank you to all our listeners, all our guests, man, everyone. You guys are the ones that are making this possible and making this show a success. So we greatly, greatly appreciate you.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
remember
so much.
this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything.